All right. Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of the relationship series. We are in season number 5 of the relationship series. And it is always a pleasure to be here on a Thursday at lunch. It is truly my favorite time of the week. So welcome. We'll wait a couple of seconds just for some folks to straggle in. But again, I always want to be mindful of your time and the fact that you choose to be here with me at lunch on a Thursday. So maybe I'll say a couple of things. I am Genevieve. I am your friendly neighborhood sister girl with the sister locks, and I am passionate about all things relationships. I am not an expert. I am just a passionate person. And I do like to share that my background is in therapy and in coaching. And so that informs some of my passion as well as some of the work that I do around relationships in terms of like research and, uh, d- well, yeah, I guess my own personal social experiments and how I view my relationships and how I cultivate my relationships as well. So here at TRS, we have transformational conversations that help us to revolutionize our relationships. We do the work, we heal for real, we sow what we want to grow. And our mission really is to share with people how to pursue connection over currency. So, how to pursue quality relationships over money or material things as the main source of value, of fulfillment, and of joy in our lives. And so we do that by talking about things that are relationship oriented and by connecting the things that are important to our development and our growth back to our relationship quality. Okay. So, season 5 is all about books. We are grounding our conversation in books. I'm a certified Maxwell leadership coach. And so, a lot of the books that I read are John Maxwell books. And so, this season, we are looking more in depthly at some of the amazing principles that we can glean from John Maxwell and from his books, and how we can apply those to our relationships. So, today, we're going to be looking at another book are some principles that are found in another book. It's called Becoming a Person of Influence. And so we're grounding our conversation in the book. And we're going to pull out some of the principles of how to be a real influencer, how to be an effective influencer, how to be a positive influencer in our lives. So we'll jump into that. Our agenda: SAQs, which are self awareness questions. We always try to locate ourselves by asking ourselves questions before we sort of delve into some of the nitty gritty informational stuff about a topic. So we'll look at some self awareness questions, do some of our own reflections. And then we will look at some quotes, which we normally do. Um, and we'll look at the types of influences that there are, and then we'll engage a little bit as well. Uh, right. Uh, How come it stopped? You gotta love technology. Sometimes I don't always um, know what's happening, but my screen froze. Can you guys still hear me? No, what happened?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, you can hear me, but my screen froze and I won't move. Okay, let me see if I can stop sharing and then share again just so that. Weird. Okay, let's try this again here. Mhm. Share. Okay, I think we're back. I don't know if I can actually use this. Um, Okay, so leadership as influence, nothing more, nothing less. This is just a quote by John Maxwell, and it's helpful for us just in terms of our framing. So, what we use to understand relationships, what we use to understand influence, what we use to um, sort of define what we're talking about today. So, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And that's what we're talking about. So, when we talk about self awareness questions, again, we're going to be asking ourselves some questions here today. I want you guys to just start thinking about who has had the most influence in your life. And so when we think about leadership, when we think about influence, when we think about building relationships, who has been fundamental to your life? Who has been the person that has made a great impact? Who has, um, helped you go further, helped you become better, helped you go faster, that kind of thing. Think, just take 10 seconds, 30 seconds maybe, and think about this. Um, and come up with a name or two. Now, when I thought about this, I thought it's funny because my mind went to like three different places. I was like, what kind of influence are we talking about? What's the quality of the influence? Like, is it a bad influence? Is it a good influence? So I actually came up with three different names. Who has had the most influence in my life, like positively speaking, um, and negatively speaking, and then most recently. So sometimes I think back like to my childhood and growing up, and then I thought, who has had the most influence in my life recently? So maybe those can be parameters for you, just to think about the person that has made the greatest impact and influence in your life. 5 seconds for that. Um, Again, it's about self-awareness, right? It's about noting these things in a more conscious and intentional way. Another question, who do you influence? So this is a question that I've if I'm honest, I haven't thought about very deeply until I was doing research for this. I was like, yeah, it's true. I guess I don't really think about who I influence. Um, and it brought a memory to mind. I remember when I was a teenager, I had a bestie, and my bestie, um, we used to spend time at each other's house. We used to sleep over at each other's houses for like weeks on end, especially during the summertime. And I was spending some time at her house, and we decided, I don't know, anyway, we used to spend time on the balcony, sing our hearts out. We used to do a lot of things, cook crazy foods and stuff. But one time I had met these boys, and we met these boys, and we were like, oh, we're gonna go meet these boys somewhere. And we went out and met up with these boys. We're teenagers, right? And I don't know what I don't know what I don't know why she did this. But she decided to invite this boy back to her house, and she lived with her parents and with her mom and her brother, her little brother. And I was like, I don't think this is a good idea because your brother's he's gonna tell. And she was like, no, he's not gonna tell. He'll be fine. He'll be fine. I was like, okay, well, sure. Anyway, she brought this boy back to her house, and um, push comes to shove, boy came, boy left. And later on in the day, when her mom came home, her and her brother got into like a little argument, and her brother ended up telling her, like, let me not say her name, sorry, but so and so had a boy in the house, and her mother was like, "What? What in the world do you mean you have boys in the house? You're just teenagers, teenage girls, and whatever." And she got so upset. I've never seen somebody so mad. She got so mad, and she was like, typical West Indian parent. I'm going to give you some licks and all these things. So we we padded my friend up with like layers so that the licks wouldn't hurt. Uh, so that when the belt came, she wouldn't feel so much licks. So she was so mad. Her mom was trying to beat her with the belt and all this stuff, and I was like, we gotta, like, this is not going to be a good thing. We got to get out of here. Anyway, we ended up leaving. This was like the middle of the night. We ended up walking back to my house. She lived a town over, we walked back to my house, and my mom called her mom, and then her mom came, and we had this like come to Jesus conversation. You're not supposed to be hanging out with boys and all this kind of stuff. And I will never forget it. Like her mom said, you know what? I don't want my daughter hanging out with Jenny anymore because Jenny is a bad influence. Jenny is a bad influence on my daughter. Um, and I was like, first of all, I was like, what? I hadn't even dreamt about kissing a boy, much less inviting one over to my house. Okay. Um, but the other thing was, I just thought to myself, like, am I really a bad influence? Like, that's not a good thing. Right. And I thought I want to not be that. Like, that's not the influence that I wanna have on other people. This is when I was a teenager, okay? And I just remember it kind of hurt on the inside because, first of all, it just wasn't true. I was not a bad influence. Like, I didn't invite no boys, okay? Um, but I'm sure you guys can remember your parents telling you to stay away from certain people because they are a bad influence, or stay away from certain events or places, because it's not gonna have a positive impact on your life. And the truth is, the places we go and the people that are in our lives influence who we are and what we do. And the things that we do and that we say, and where we go and so on, also has the same power to influence others, right? And so when I think of who do I influence, I had to sort of take a step back, and I was like, yeah, who are the people that are around me, who have stuck with me, who have been journeying with me, or who I connect with the best. What are the qualities of those people? And even if you don't think so, because I didn't really think so, we have a platform. We have a platform of influence and of leadership, and of modeling or being an example to others. If you have a social media platform, you have some kind of influence. If you have people in your life, um, that look to you in certain situations, whether you're a director or manager, or supervisor, or team leader at work, whether you are a minister, a pastor, some kind of leader at church, whether you're a parent, an elderly sibling, like, a cousin who has influence at home or in your family, right? We're talking like kids, friends, parents, whoever we are. There's something about having that mutual kind of influence on each other, right? And for us, we have to come to a place where we realize, like, people listen to us. If you're on social media, people read your comments, right? They follow your voice in some way. They follow your words in some way. And it took me a minute to realize this, and also to take it seriously, because it's a big deal, you know. And it's somewhat weighty when we realize that there's responsibility that comes along with influencing other people, And I think for me, what I realize is that, um, the question, "Who do I influence?" helped me to pay closer attention. And I've asked this question, I asked this question a long time ago, so this is not a new question. But in terms of like realizing, the scope now, definitely hit home a little more heavy. Like when I was growing up, and those of you who've grown up with me, and my mom especially, she can tell you, I used to spit fire, like really harsh words that at times really hurt people. Um, and I I didn't realize the impact of my words back then. I actually didn't. And I think the truth is that we have more of an ability to shape other people and what they do than we think we do. Um, and the way that we respond in our communication and so on, like, we have that kind of influence. And I think people, by listening to us and sticking with us, they give us permission. I see a chat. um, they give us permission to speak into their lives. So that's just to say we influence more people than we realize. And I think there's a statistic, I heard it a while ago, is the average person will influence like 10,000 people in their lifetime. That's the average person, not the social media influencer, not people in high positions or in political roles or what have you. This is the average person. That's like the you and me's of the world. 10,000 people, that's a lot of people, right? Let me read the chat. Jojo, parents do give that direction to stay away from certain people, and because it's not usually followed with an explanation of why, in a way that the child can understand, the advice is sometimes ignored. Absolutely, yeah. And I think sharing the like the future consequences and outcomes of potentially connecting to people who have negative impact on our lives, like that's a huge deal for especially for a child to understand. And then make sure it's coming from a good place because I don't think I was a bad influence. So yes, asking the question, who do you influence? uh, and then you can answer if you want as well. You guys can, again, I always say I'm interruptible. You can turn on your mics. You can throw something in the chat. I'll read it out. Um, if you guys want to answer out loud or if you just want to answer inside and reflect, that's fine as well. Um, but yeah, what kind of people would you like to influence? What kind of people would you like to lead? What kind of people would you like to be in relationship with? Is a good question. Because whether we know it or not, we're doing this. We're leading. We're influencing. We're building relationships with people. There are people in our lives that look up to us, and the decisions that we we make that are intentional are the best decisions, right? So we can choose to have a positive or negative influence or a good or bad influence. And when we think of like the when we do something on purpose, it just has more effect, right? So I think this question is a thoughtful one. Do we want people around us who are kind and generous and trustworthy and those kind creative and dreamers. I know I like people that dream and have great vision. And do we want people around us who are kind of apathetic and let us live mediocre average lives. So it's a question of sort of intentional pursuit of relationship. Who are we actually attracting? And I remember when I used to apply for jobs, and they used to have these tests that you take, and it was very evident that they were looking for a particular type of person. Yes, aptitude and proficiency was important, but they were also looking for a certain like personality, a certain kind of person to fit into the culture of that organization or that group. And when I started thinking about this, I started thinking about that. Like, if people were to submit resumes to you, what kind of people would you be looking for to add to your life? Are they like cutthroat, competitive, sales oriented, gritty people, right? Some organizations want that in their culture. Or are they emotionally intelligent, relationally intelligent? Do they express themselves well? Do they recover well from conflict? Do they relate well to other people? And I find that as I grow, that I'm looking for more of that. I'm looking for, the people around me that are relationally intelligent. Hence, the relationship series where I get to come and talk about the elements and components that make us better at relationships and give us better chances of having quality relationships. So ask yourself what kind of people you would like to have around you, that you would like to influence, um, and also and maybe we'll go to the next slide, but also think about if you are that kind of person. One of the things that I've realized is that we attract a lot of what we are as opposed to a lot of what we want. And so if we are leaders, we'll attract leaders. If we're creatives, we'll attract creatives and so on. So we tend to most greatly influence people that are most like us, if that makes sense. I hope that's clear. So thinking about like the kind of people that we want around us, also think about whether or not we are that kind of person. If we're modeling some of those qualities that we would like to have and see and experience in the people that we want around us. So that brings me to my next SAQ, which is, would you follow you? So would you follow yourself? Would you want to be influenced by yourself, right? So when we're thinking about the influence and the impact that we have on other people, would we want that for ourselves, right? And so would you be in a relationship with yourself? Would you enjoy a relationship with yourself? That's a really good question. Because if we can't lead ourselves, if we can't be in relationships in a good way with ourselves, then we're kind of asking a lot from other people. Right? Like, and do we really want to do that for anyone else? And I think it starts with simple things, right? This is not like complicated deep. This is like, hey, do you show up for yourself? Do you keep your commitments to yourself? Do you show up on time? Do you show up with a smile? Do you show up with a good attitude? Like those kinds of things. Do you genuinely appreciate and like and love and want to be around other people? Like if you don't even want to do that for yourself, like other people are going to feel that. Like I remember this came from a 5-year-old boy. Came from a 5-year-old boy. I was hanging out and his dad, he went to see his dad or something, and his dad was like, "Hey," and he was like, "Hey, dad, it's really good to see you." And his dad, yeah, was like, "Okay, good to see you too." And he's like, and the little boy said, "Well, why don't you smile and like get excited and hug me when you see me if it's good to see me?" And I was like, "Whoa!" Out of the mouth of babes, right? Like, how often do we express and exhibit that joy in like meeting up with other people and having people in our lives? Like, if the people around you don't know that you're excited to see them and be with them, then there's probably something else going on, right? We need to express that. So yeah, would you follow you? Would you like, that's a good question to sort of ask yourself, um, and wonder about. Um, I think I have 3 more questions. So where do I influence others? So this is a where question. Um, and just thinking about, who you are in contact with on a regular basis, right? Where does that happen most of the time? Where are you aware of it and where are you maybe not aware of it? And I think the main thing that I think about when I think of this question is at work. So we're in a working environment. I work for myself, and so it's different. I don't have like an office to go to. I mean, this is my office, right? I don't I don't have employees that I can like stop at a cubicle, but I used to. I used to work in that environment, and I found that there was a lot of opportunity to receive influence in that environment from my team leaders and so on, and I respected them greatly. Um, but what I realized was that it wasn't always the people with positions that I respected as leaders or that I recognized as leaders. Sometimes it's people who didn't have no positions at all. They didn't have no titles, right? They were just people, peers, my colleagues and so on, but they possessed such capacity for leadership, for connection, for influence that I looked to them for direction and mentorship as opposed to those who had great positions and increase salaries, right? So I would say that for this question, just where do I influence? It's so big and so broad, right? It's not necessarily a person with a title, or if you have a title, um, it could be anything, right? It could be anything. And maybe even think about like when you asked yourself the question, who influenced me most in my life, or who had the most impact on me? Did that person have a position? Most people don't identify people with positions. Mostly it's like my mom had the most influence on me, or like a neighbor had the most influence on me, or something like, or a teacher or a coach. I guess teacher and coach is kind of a position of authority. Um, but it wasn't really, somebody with like a big title or like managerial position or whatever. It was somebody who was like close to us in relationship, who liked us, who loved us, and that we could trust, right? So, where do I influence? So think about that. What spheres you have influence in, and you know what? This brings up a point. I remember talking to a fellow coach, and he said that he sometimes takes inspiration and leadership from people around him that he never talks to. Like, he goes on a commute to work, and there's always somebody there, same person, but they're always reading, like, a new book, and he just, like, notes the book that they read. So he allows people in his environment to influence him without him ever having a conversation with them. So you might be influencing people in places you don't know, on the train, on your commute to work, on your drive to work or what have you. People might see you and never talk to you, but they see you and they look at you and they see how you conduct yourself, or maybe you always smell good, or maybe, whatever the case is. So it's a broad platform, right? So just think maybe creatively about like where you influence others. And then when do you influence others? When is a great question. Um, I I I think we influence others when they need it most, right? Part of my job is as a therapist, and people come to me when they're struggling, when they don't feel good, when they want to feel better. And so I get to chat with them, have transformational conversations with them when they need it most, when they need the most change in their lives, right? And I think that we are talking about relationships now because we're at a critical point in our history and in our development. I think it's a catalytic moment in history. We're talking about AI taking off, taking over. We're talking about connections and the way we do connections transformed by the interwebs and social media. We're talking about like people turning to fake um like fake people, like fake programming to get their intimacy needs met. I don't know if you guys have heard about these trends. We're talking about identity crises. We're talking about so many things that have fundamentally to do with the way that we find acceptance, approval, belonging to get those relational needs met. And that's what we're created for. Right. And so we're talking about this at a crucial point in in our history, when things are shifting and changing and we need more truth than anything else because there's so many of us that are struggling to do the thing that we were born to do and to do it well. The thing that brings us the greatest fulfillment, our greatest sense of purpose, which is to do relationships and connect with other people. We are struggling to do that well. And so I think like the when for us, and for myself, and talking about relationships in this way, is important, right? And I try to do this every day with every interaction that I have, because I'm like, if we could come to a place where we can see and we can realize it even more, we can become more aware of it, then we can tap into it more, we can pursue it more, we can get more fulfillment out of our lives. So when do you influence others? What's sort of in your heart and your passion? Does it come up in every conversation? I've talked to such amazing people. I mean, I meet people all the time, and um, they have influence over me just by sharing and inspiring me with what's on their minds, what's going on in their lives and in their hearts, and just by doing that. And I don't say just because I don't take it lightly, but it might not be evident, right? And it might not be intentional. So when do you influence others? Think about that. And then why do you want to influence? This is a great question. Our why is always important, right? Why we do something ultimately determines our level of influence in that thing with others. And it also influences the quality of what we do, right? So if we're doing something for our own, self-serving purposes, or we're doing things for our own personal gain, and we don't necessarily care about others, and we've asked this question a number of times, right? Like, do we really care about people? Because that's such an important question. Um, our why we want to do this thing is really important. So right motives can really be crucial when it comes to leadership and when it comes to influence, because we don't want to veer into being a bad influence. We don't want to veer into like coercion and manipulation and that kind of thing. So we'll get into some of the principles here. There are 6 methods of influence, some good and others, well, yeah, trust me, you don't want to stoop to those levels. Um, And that helps us ask the question, how do you influence them? How do you influence other people? What methods are you using? Um, what ways what approaches are you using to influence other people? And again, some of it could be inadvertent, or unintentional. Um, and then today we're kind of looking at what we can do to bring ourselves into a more intentional space, looking at how we influence other people. Let me look at most common way of influencing other people when it comes to especially workplaces, and maybe Afro-Caribbean parents can relate, and those of you of Afro-Caribbean descent can also relate. This intimidation, my way or the highway type of leadership or type of influence. Um, I think I think this was part of my experience growing up. Um, it worked to a certain degree. It wasn't the most effective, but it did work to a certain degree. When parents say children have to be seen and not heard, and when we don't have a lot of like input, we're kind of like told what to do, listen, obey, do as I say, not as I do, that kind of vibe. As humans, I don't think we tolerate that well for very long. as children, we kind of have to. We don't really have a choice, kind of thing. But I think what I've come to understand about this type of way of influencing is that it really served to like stunt my growth or my growth capacity. Um, when it was, how do I explain it? It's more like suppressing, like shushing, shutting down, and I found that to be like kind of like a soul crushing experience. Like I wasn't able to, you know, really be as big or as creative or as bright as I wanted to be. It was kind of like, just follow this very narrow path, and I think there's room for that. Um, but I also think there's room for the exploration and the curiosity as well that fosters creativity. And so when we do the like the intimidation, my way or the highway, it's like we shut down the ability or the opportunity for creativity and for innovation in that environment. Um, we 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 don't tend to think critically or creatively anymore because we've just been told, hey, follow these rules, follow this way, follow this direction. And I think growing up, it 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 doesn't foster what we need most to help us navigate in the real world. Because I mean, when we grow up, we'll struggle to express ourselves. We struggle to advocate for ourselves. We struggle to ask good questions, struggle to ask for help. We struggle in these ways, struggle to make decisions, struggle to feel confident about our thoughts and our thought processes and our decisions, right? We lean more to like, oh, who's going to tell me what to do? Oh, I need to just follow rules and regulations, and that can hinder us at times because how many of us could be like entrepreneurs and business owners and have all these things, but it's like, no, I just have to stay in this box or in these parameters. So it can do a lot of damage, this sort of uh, influencing way, intimidation, my way or the highway. So culturally speaking, I think there's room for growth in this area, and then of course in various environments and working environments and organizations, there's definitely room for for growth in this as well. Um, I find that a lot of entry level workers tend to follow the rules, like frontline workers, and there's such a disconnect between like the policymakers or the board members or those who are in positions of power within organizations. There's a disconnect, such a gap between them and the people who are actually on the ground doing the work. Um, and that I think is a form of my way or the highway. Like we make the rules, you just follow them, right? I heard a story. It was about uh, is it Chi Cheese? I don't know. It was a restaurant chain in the US, and they're quite successful, but their one of their policies was to implement like to take suggestions from their patrons, like people that came to their restaurant, take their suggestions, and 80% of like their menu was based on their customer suggestions. So they weren't like my way or the highway. They were like, let's find out what the people want, and then let's do that. It was kind of a I don't know, kind of a backwards model maybe, or top down, bottom up, whatever model for doing business, but it was very successful for them. And I think that openness to having input and having collaboration can really help create success and both relevant, positive, and effective influence. So this is okay. One form of leadership. Let me look at quote. I feel like chose slides, but anyway, without trust, influence is nothing more than coercion and manipulation. Ooh, so again, right motives. Right motives are necessary and important because influence, leadership, relationships, they all function on the basis and on the foundation of trust. All of them, all of this built on a foundation of trust. And I think the reason why influence is such a skill is that it's more complicated than just like, I'm gonna, go out and get followers and get people to, buy into what I'm doing. Um, it's built on and established by credibility and people trusting you, but you have to demonstrate the um, you have to demonstrate what's required in order for people to trust you, right? And where there's trust, people know that you're there for them. People know that uh, the group is there for each other, or whatever, that you guys have shared interests as a team, or as a couple, or as a family, or as a group of friends, whatever the case is. I think the I can't remember the author, but there was a quote. He said the one thing that changes everything in both business and life is trust, right? The trust factor. Um, and you guys might know Stephen Covey. He's a best-selling author, but he wrote a new book. It's called The Speed of Trust, and how the speed of trust, so the speed at which people begin to trust you, especially in our day and age with the interwebs and all that kind of stuff, um, is the foundation of the new global economy. So the faster you get people to trust you, to know you, to demonstrate your credibility, is the faster your client base, your customer base, and all that will grow and expand. And of course, that the bottom line is both your professional um, and organizational success, right? Trust is a huge factor, and we hear it all the time, like especially in relationships, like, "Oh, this person, they're trying to manipulate me," and whenever I hear that, I hear, "Oh, they're trying to manipulate me." I think the trust is already gone. There's already a fracture in the trust foundation, because any recommendation, any idea, any suggestion, any encouragement any shared idea, if you filter it through a lens of distrust, it can come out and sound like manipulation. Hey, I thought, maybe you should do this. Maybe this is a good idea. Like, if you don't have trust for that person, that they have your best interest in mind or at heart, you can hear that as manipulation. This person trying to control me, this person trying to manipulate me, this person trying to, you know what I mean? And it's really us. It's really that there's a fracture somewhere in our capacity and our ability to trust other people. We're kind of giving them side eye, like, what are you asking me to do that for? Why are you telling me to do that? Like, is it really for my best interest, or is it for you? Is it going to benefit your bottom line? Right. And when we start asking those kinds of questions and having that kind of distrust, then there's no longer capacity for us to be in healthy quality relationship. And we have to do the work of recovery. I don't know if I heard this quote a long time ago. It was, trust is lost in buckets, gained in drops. Trust is lost in buckets and gained in drops. And so if we drop the ball, we spill that bucket of trust, it's going to be really difficult to climb that hill again, to do the drops and fill the bucket again. So it's better to just not lose the trust in the first place. Um, it's funny, maybe last year or so, I've done a few workshops for different organizations, and the foundation has been rebuilding trust between, like, management and entry level employees. Trust is a big deal. It impedes our capacity to work. It impedes morale at work. It just affects our and it even affects our mental health. Like, when we're in a relationship with people and we can't trust them, or we don't feel like we can trust them, then we can't rely on them, depend on them, and get what we need from them, right? So there's a lot that rises and falls on trust when it comes to um, influence and leadership. Okay, let's look at the methods of influence. And here's five, one, two, three, four, five, six of them. Force, there is no choice in the decision. So from worst to best, methods of influence. Force is a method of influence. There's no choice in the decision. Intimidation, we talked about that, my way or the highway. Manipulation is one. There's a winner and a loser. So that means I gain, you lose, right? In this kind of leadership. Um, Positional leadership, and we'll talk about that in a moment. We'll unpack a couple of these. Positional leadership is when we follow because we have to. So, if we are in a position, people follow us because they have to. When we take away, like, the perks, um, if we take away a paycheck, or if we take away the corner office or whatever, then people won't follow. So that might be something to take into consideration. Exchange is we both win, in win at something, or win in that form of leadership and influence. And we see this a lot in, like, friendships. Friendships is when there's usually friendships, or like peer leaderships, is when there's usually the most amount of mutual benefit and positive influence. But we'll unpack a couple of them. Okay, this is the lowest level of leadership, which is positional leadership that we just chatted about at this level. Again, people follow you because they have to, not because they want to. And it is, um, I think, one of the things that my generation and maybe the older generations really value. We value position, right? We were taught, hey, respect, if you have a professor or a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, like you respect them and you trust them and you do what they say. You listen to them. They've gone through the schooling and the education and so on. And so for that reason, they're trustworthy and have a right in some way to influence your life. Um, but I think thinking about the and maybe maybe the younger generations are onto something, because as many complaints as we have, or as many criticisms as we have about the younger generation, Gen Z, we can't really take away how they're going about things, and how it's kind of inspirational, right? Like, they understand this principle, this premise, that influence doesn't come from a title. um and as much as they may not have the credentials or the life experience or the education or the wisdom or truth in some cases, they do what they're doing based on this premise. Like, I can be an influencer just because. And I love the idea. I don't necessarily love the execution, but I love the idea because they see themselves as leaders. They see themselves as influencers without barrier. Like, there's no blocks to that idea that they can have a platform that they can use to share themselves and influence others, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. And there's a lot of negative out there. Um, a lot. There's a lot of damaging information because anybody can have a platform. But I think the idea or the premise is one that we can hold and adopt, right? Like, we don't need a position to have influence or to lead, right? So, as a good leader, and if we are a good leader, then our influence will expand, and if we're not, then our influence will shrink, and so on. But I think our positions, if we choose to attend to them or try to get them, or our education, our degrees, or whatever, if we choose to pursue them, they can be an opportunity for us to showcase, our ability and our capacity to influence well, as opposed to it's the means to the end. You should respect me and honor me because of my position or education, right? And so I think there's value in it. I just don't think that it's the be all end all. It's a measure, right? Um, so influence is not about position. Um, and lead yourself better and others will follow. So do the work before you need to, right? And this is about learning to lead yourself well. And this is sort of asking the question, how like, would I follow me? And I think it's a good question to ask, but also a good practice for us to intentionally pursue, right? We can't get somewhere and then all of a sudden just know how to be there, right? We have to lead ourselves there. We have to grow ourselves into different layers and levels of what we want to do. Um, and I thought about this, and just in terms of a lot of people ask, they're like, "Hey, you're doing relationship series. How do you monetize this? How do you grow this?" And I haven't necessarily thought about that, but as I was doing this research and just reading through the book again and so on, I thought, if I was a more confident leader or influencer, I would likely lean into building a team. If I was a more trusting leader or influencer, I would trust others to do the things that I don't like to do, that take up a lot of my time, and that other people can do better than me, like administration for one, and all this like technological, creative stuff. Um, but I think that leading myself better would put me in a position to do that, right? And I'm not there yet. And when I think about all the things I want to achieve out of life, my goals and objectives, and I think about who can help me achieve those goals, I think about it, and then I stop. I'm like, well, am I consistent enough? Can I motivate them? Can I encourage them? Can I inspire them? Can I grow with them? Can I pour into them? in a way that is viable. I think about that. Like, am I leading myself in a way that I would lead others or want others to follow, like in these other areas to expand, this platform for an example, right? Can I make the vision clear enough or attractive enough for other people to buy into? Like, I think about these things and I'm like, I'm not there yet. I don't lead myself well enough to even desire necessarily to expand. People are like, oh, you can monetize, or you can do this. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I want to talk about things that are going on in my life that are real for me, and that I'm being honest about where I'm at. It's like I don't want to pretend that I'm somewhere that I'm not, or someone that I'm not, or I'm better at something that I'm not. You know what I mean? Like, in my heart, I'm like, if I'm not there, then why pretend I'm there? Or why do something that requires for me to be there? I want to get there before I get there, so to speak, right? Um, so I want to do the work before I need to have done the work, if that makes sense. Um, so I think about that, and just in terms of like what what leading the self looks like for me personally. Um, and it means doing the work of like sharing. Like, am I willing to share? Am I willing to share the good, the bad, the ugly parts of this journey? Right? Like when I'm tired, or when I have to stay up late because I didn't get my PowerPoint done or whatever. Like, am I willing to take ownership of all the steps in the process? And like, am I willing to ask for help? Am I willing to listen? Am I willing to make mistakes? Am I willing to allow others to make mistakes? Like, there's so many pieces and layers and levels to it that I think about when I think of leading myself better, right? That I'm like, man, I don't even want others to follow me. Like, there's certain areas where I'm like, yeah, maybe I might be a little bit ahead. Um, but for the most part, I'm like, I don't want to get ahead of myself. And I think leading yourself well as a value and as a principle can help you mitigate against some of the challenges that might come if you do too much too soon, or do the most, and then you have to sort of scale back because you don't have the foundation or the skill set or the strengths yet, to maintain at that level, right? So leading yourself well, leading yourself better will give you the influence that you need for others to follow. So if leadership is not about coercion and position, then what is it about? It is about people. And I see a chat. What's one area you feel you lead yourself well, and one area you want to improve in? I think it's the same area. Thank you, Samuel, for the question. It's in relationships. I think it's the same area. I'm constantly, um, logging my wins, and then I'm constantly looking for ways to grow and to develop. So this is probably the main area in my life that I get to practice and pump muscles in every day. Um, so leadership is about people. We call this peer leadership or peer influencing, and this is the highest form of leadership. And I think it is because this is the level that people follow you because they want to, because they like you, because they like what you're saying, because they can co-sign and subscribe to what you're about, right? So I think, and I heard this in a workshop that I went to. The guy asked the question. He's like, if you were like in a group of people and you got promoted tomorrow, like, how would your peers feel about that? How would your peers accept you, or would they accept you? Would they want to follow you? Would they let you lead them? And I thought about that. I was like, yeah, that's a good question. So every single day we have to be looking at like, how can I influence and develop my, like, you know, horizontal peer relationships, right? Um, and as soon as you start thinking about like everything that you do, you realize like nothing happens without other people. Like, other people are instrumental in our lives and how we grow. To be successful, we have to be influenced by and influence the people that are around us, the people that are present. Like, 90 something percent of everything that we want, everything that we're going to do, everything that we're going to have in our lives comes from and through other people. And so we have to learn to do relationships well with other people. And that means taking our responsibility seriously to influence them well, right? So leadership, influence, it's about people. And then we want to talk about quickly, how do we increase our influence with other people? Influence comes from seeing value in and adding value to other people, right? Seeing value in mean one of my mentors says, put a 10 on their heads, see gold in them, right? If you see gold, or if you go into a gold mine, you don't go you go looking for gold, but you don't go expecting gold from the outset. You have to dig through the dirt. So see people like that. There's gold in them. Sometimes you got to dig through some dirt to get to the gold, right? Put a 10 on their head. See people as valuable. um, and then adding value to others. This is another way to increase our influence. Adding value to others means doing something like helping them in some way, being present with them. That could be inspiring them to pursue their goals and dreams. You know, some people they ask me, "Hey, how'd you move out of the country? What, like, or are you looking to that? Let me let you know what I did. Let me let you know about some steps. You know, I have a whole exit plan journal. You know what I mean? It could mean just lifting them up and encouraging them, like helping them see themselves in a positive light, right? Like, convincing them that they're not as bad as they think they are, right? And I think that's part of the beauty of living in community with other people, because people can see our blind spots, people can support us to grow in the areas where we're not strong, people can strengthen us in areas where we are still growing, like all of this, like seeing value and adding value to people can come in really easy, simple ways on a day-to-day basis, right? So adding value, seeing value in and adding value to can increase our level of influence. We can also do this. Answer the affirmative in these three questions. Do you care about me? If we can say yes, we care about this other person, then we can increase our influence in their lives. Can you help me? If we can say yes, we can help this other person, then we can increase our influence in their lives. Can they trust you? If you can say yes, then you are qualified to increase your influence in this person's life, right? People want to know these things. Right? We live in an age, because of the interwebs and social media, and there's poor advice and practices when it comes to relationships. We have an entire generation that has grown up with more issues than ever before. Okay. Um, but if we can answer these questions, I'm getting feedback. Why am I getting feedback? Somebody's mic's on. Is somebody trying to get my attention? I don't see a hand up, but you can speak if you're trying to share. Um, but yeah, when people want to know these things, this is how we increase our influence. Here's another way to increase our influence. I call this the 4-H plan. The 4-H plan is just having a conversation and talking about these important aspects of our lives. What is their hope? What is their heart? What is their hurt? And how can I help? Right? Just, I mean, it takes 5 minutes. Hey, what's going on with you? What's happening in your life? What are you dreaming about? What are you working on? Right? What are you hoping for? What are you leaning towards? Right? What's been going on? What have you been wrestling with? What have you been struggling with lately? And how can I support you? How can I support you if there's anything I can do? Right? 4-H plan. That's how we can increase our influence in other people's lives. Last point: how do we increase our influence? When we add value to ourselves, we become more valuable to others. Right? And this is about self leadership. This is about self awareness questions. What is that we are doing? Right? How do we grow ourselves? This is always important, always the first step, right? When we are adding value to others, when we are adding value to ourselves, we become more valuable to other people. And it can be as simple as taking time to reflect. And I love reflection because reflection is very, very free. It's free for us. It takes a few minutes a day. But making time to review and to reflect on how we're doing can be a way for us to add value to ourselves. I'm going to give you the starter kit for reflection in a second. But I want you to think about how you can do this reflection thing, just pausing and thinking 5 minutes a day, right? It doesn't take like a whole retreat. You don't need a whole retreat, 5-day retreat. You just need 10 minutes a day to reflect. And here's your reflection starter kit. Ask yourself these three questions every day. Every day. It could be throughout the day, it could be in the evening when you sit down, right? If you answer these three questions every day for the next 7 days, I guarantee you will be more productive and more effective in your lives. I promise you, right? How many of us want to be more productive, more successful, more influential, more all the things? Um, you can ask yourself these three questions. I ask myself these three questions every day, right? And I assure you it'll change your life. What went right? What went wrong? And what can I do differently? Three simple questions. What went right? What went wrong? And what can I do differently? Some of us deal with the same things over and over. We are in the same patterns and in the same cycle over and over. We find ourselves in the same type of relationships, struggling with the same proclivities, struggling with the same types of hindrances to our connections or to our success or to our growth or to pursuing our goals. We're constantly procrastinating. We're never finishing what we start. We can't execute. We can't express. We can't, all these things. And we find that we just keep going, keep going. But the invitation to reflect is an invitation to get out of the cycle. I promise you it's powerful. So take some time to reflect. You'll find that you may not be making the same relational mistakes, right? Um, so take some time to reflect daily. What went right? What went wrong? What can I do differently? No matter who you are, if you're a mom, if you're a pastor, if you're a leader, if you're a minister, we have some pastors, we have some parents, we have some directors. We have people in the room today. All forms and levels of influence. And so, doing your work, self leadership, asking yourself how you can grow yourself, can add value to others, can influence others in a powerful and positive way. Last quote: Mastering your ability to positively influence others is the key to personal and professional growth. I love that. I love that. Mastering your ability to positively influence others. And this means in your relationships, guys. This means when you're connecting with other people, to positively influence others is the key. You will grow exponentially um, if you master this aspect of your lives. And you do this intentionally and responsibly, right, with integrity. And that leads me to your cheat sheet. Here's your cheat sheet. These are the principles of um, of influencing, effective influencing. Um, it's such a privilege to be here with you guys. I just want to say that, and you can take a snapshot of this, or take a picture of it if you want. You can also watch the replay. It's going to be on YouTube in about an hour, or you can leave your email if you want to, and I'll send it to you. But this is your cheat sheet. What do great influencers do? They have integrity with people. They nurture people. They have faith in people. They listen to people. They understand people. They enlarge people. They navigate for people, show other people the way. They connect with people. They empower people, and they reproduce influencers. They reproduce influencers. That's what great influencers do. So those are your principles of influence. Uh, 4-week masterminds coming in the new year. If you guys want to go deeper in any of this, you can sign up. I think I'm going to do one per month because I can't do them all at the same time. But we're going to read the book and read these books, flesh out the best bits. If you guys want to go deeper in any of these areas: influence, communication, personal growth, attitude, connecting with other people, let me know. Kevin has his hand up. Kevin, talk to me.
I came in about 20 minutes behind schedule there. But is there a difference in your mind between influence versus leadership?
No, there isn't. So the first quote slide was here. Maybe I can go back to it. Leadership is influence. Where did I put it? Nothing more, nothing less. Is that it? Leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. So they're one and the same. They go hand in hand.
All right.
Yes, yes, yes. Any other questions or thoughts? Um, Sorry, I'm going through it really quickly. I want to get one. Oh, yes, next week. Next week, I invite you guys back. We're going to be going through another John Maxwell book. It's called Put Your Dreams to the Test. So, a lot of us have big dreams, and a lot of us have not pursued those big dreams. And uh, our dreams are worth it, is what I want to say. Our dreams are worth pursuing. They are worth pursuing, even if you put it down or you've gotten stuck, um, or you've gotten a delay or what have you, or the obstacles have gotten in your way. Our dreams are worth it. So we all have big dreams in our minds, and if we don't, um, we can learn. We can learn to have bigger dreams. I don't know. It might be a thing. If you don't want to have big dreams, and this is not the conversation for you. So next week we're going to be talking about put your dreams to the test, looking at big dreams. I want you guys to come on back. It's Thursdays at 12. We're here for lunch. I hope you guys are grabbing a snack or a drink or something like that. Um, But it's always a pleasure. Thursday is my favorite day of the week, and I love to just come and chat with you guys um, about important things. Any questions or thoughts? We were kind of quiet today. We were kind of quiet in the in the chat and on the microphone today. I feel like we've been quiet for the last couple of weeks. You guys are just like taking it in, soaking it in, and like absorbing and stuff. But thank you guys for being present here. Always a pleasure. And I'll let you go because I do like to let you guys go on time. So enjoy the rest of your day. And I'll see you guys next week on the relationship series.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, guys.